Hey guys, this is Matt for cgtuts.com, and this is the third and final part of our Canon A1 modelling tutorial. Now we've got quite a bit to do today, but we're not going to be using any techniques that we haven't already covered. So as we finish up these top section parts, I'm basically just going to give you an overview of how they're put together. We're then going to move down to the middle section and add in the cuts, which will create these kind of extrudes running around the body, and then we'll work on the hinge on the left side of the camera. With that done, we'll add in a few extra little items and then start work on the lens, which is essentially just a cylinder with several cuts in it and some bevels and fun things like that, so there's nothing to get too daunted about. So, that said, let's get going. Okay, so first off, I've gone and copied this frame from the top of this shutter box and brought it down to the very top of the camera body down here. And this is the frame you look through to see basically how many shots you've taken. And all I've done is just copied this and resized it slightly. And I also went in and deleted this extra section that we added on the end. And when it's cleaned up, it looks a bit like this. Now, at the moment, if I go and select the top section body as well, we obviously can't see through it. So we need to add in a hole that kind of is hidden beneath this frame. So I'm going to go to the top section body, and I'm going to come over to here, and I'm just going to hide our top details for a second. And I'm going to grab this edge running down here, like that, and I'll grab this bit as well. I'm going to bring back our top details, and I'm going to pull these all the way across to that edge, so it's just in the middle of that frame. Now with that done, I'm going to select this polygon and hit delete to get rid of it. In Subdivision Surface mode, you can see that it turns into a circle, so we need to shore up some of the edges, but making sure that we don't really add in too many extra polygons because we've got this nice curve flow here and here. So I'm going to hide our top details. Don't delete them. That'd be a waste of time. And we're going to go around and do exactly what we did a moment ago by adding in these triangles on the corners. Now remember, when you do this, you create kind of odd-sided polygons, so I'm going to have to draw an edge across there as well, and then back to the corner. So really what we're doing is creating this kind of diagonal square with a bit missing, really. And this is just going to kind of shore up these corners for us because it adds in this extra vert on either side of it. Remember, that's what we need to do to keep it in place when we go to Subdivision Surface mode. So I'm just going to keep going around and add in these extra corners and make sure that you make everything into a quad. Actually, let's drag that to there and to there. And with that done, I'm just going to check everything, and you see we've got kind of a five-sided polygon there, so I'm just going to draw one extra edge from there all the way over to the middle to keep everything quad and tri. And then if we go to Subdivision Surface mode, you see we get a nice kind of square hole in that. So if we bring back our top details and select our shot count frame, we can now see through the main body, which is what we want. So we're now going to start work on this section, which houses the winder, and I've gone ahead and created a cylinder for us. And this is a 16-sided cylinder. If I go to a back view, you'll see what I've done is extruded it down and then added in these extra holes which match the back reference. So you can see we actually have 4 sections to the cylinder. I've then gone in and filled in all of these holes with a single polygon. So we're going to start work on this top section first, so I'm going to select it and hit Shift-H to hide everything else. Then I'll go to a top view and take a look at what we've got. So we need to add in these smaller holes into this cylinder. So I'm going to grab this top face and bevel it in slightly, and then delete that polygon. Now we need to create these cylinders, and I've already actually done that in another layer. And I'm going to copy and paste those into this guy. Now you can see I've created these smaller cylinders, they're 8-sided cylinders, and I've rotated them slightly to match the orientation of the cylinder. So we now need to join everything up. So I'm going to select 3 edges on there, and 3 edges on there, and hit Edge and Bridge. And then going to select edges around this side, and we're going to bridge those guys. And I'll do the same thing over here as well. So I'm going to grab these 4 edges and bridge those. Then what we can do is double click these edge loops and hit P to fill them with polygons, and it's just a case of going in and creating quads or tris. Now in this case I can add 2 extra edges to this inner set of quads, and then we can just join these up right across the object like that. And this just creates a nice way of creating these 2 small circles within this larger one. Now we just go in, grab these guys and bevel them into position. And remember to join these polygons up using the vertex join averaged command, like so. So grab that other vert and then join averaged, and OK. If I go to Subdivision Surface mode, you can see we've created a nice hole inside this cylinder. Now obviously this edge needs some work, so I'm going to select the Loop Slice tool and join that up. Then we're going to bevel in this bottom one once, and again, and then just pull it down slightly. And then I'm going to hit backspace to get rid of that polygon. So that is the top section done. So I'm going to hit U on my keyboard to unhide it. Now just so we don't get confused, I'm going to take that out of Subdivision Surface mode. Now we're going to work on these bottom two. Now we're going to start on this bottom cylinder here, so I've selected it and hit Shift H to hide everything else. Now this is the extrusion that we want to create on this cylinder, so I'm going to rotate this on the y-axis slightly until this polygon roughly lines up with the position of this extrusion. So about there looks pretty good to me, so I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, select this polygon and then bevel it out once. So I'm going to shift it out. Then we're going to inset it, or rather the opposite of insetting, so I suppose X setting or something, out to match the edge of this extrusion. And then going to shift click one more time and pull it out. And then with that polygon still selected, I'm going to scale it in using the green circle, and this will match our reference image like that. Now we can take a look at what we've got. The current problem is that this face here is going below this circle, which itself sits on the very top of the camera, so we know that this isn't correct. Now to fix this, I'm going to delete this loop of polygons and double click this section. I'll go to a left view, and we're going to move this up to match. I'm then going to zoom out slightly, and we see that we need to move these verts up to match the reference image. And with that done, we now need to join the two parts back together. So at the moment we don't have enough edges on the bottom to join up to these verts, so I'm going to select this edge, and with a count of 2 and a symmetry mode on, I'm going to drag out 2 edges like that, which will mean that we can come in and weld these verts using our shortcut. Now we also need to add 1 edge running around the bottom, so we can add in a polygon here. So I'm going to select this guy, change our count to 1 and our mode to 3, and drag this down to the bottom, like so. What we can do is then select these 4 verts and hit P, and do the same thing over here. Select these 4 verts and hit P. I then select this entire edge loop, deselect these 2 end edges using Control, and then we can click Bridge to fill in the gap. Now at the moment, if we go to Subdivision Surface mode, obviously things aren't going to look so good, so we're going to go in and add in some extra edges. I'm going to add in 1 at the bottom of that, and 1 at the top of that. I'm going to add in 1 on either side of here as well, to keep that nice and square. I'll add 1 at the end of here, but I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap, as we want this to be a little bit more curved than this section. We're going to add 1 running around the top, like that, and then 1 at this end as well. And with that all done, if I hit Tab, you can see that we have our nice shaped extrusion there, and our circle isn't looking too bad either. Now one thing we want to do to this is grab both of these polygons in here. I'm going to bevel them in once, and bevel them in again, and then I'm going to grab this bottom one, vertex, join averaged, and do the same to the top, like that. Now just like before, if we go to Subdivision Surface mode, this isn't quite maintaining its circular shape, so you need to go in and ever so slightly drag these verts back into position. It's just a case of doing this a little bit by eye. You can bring up the other layers in a minute to check. So when you're roughly happy, you can hit space to drop the tool and U to unhide the other layers. And then going to double click all of these layers and put them in Subdivision Surface mode. And if we go to a top view, we can then see how well we're matching. I'm just going to grab this vert and pull it in slightly. With that done, things are looking pretty good. So we can do exactly the same thing on this upper cylinder now to create this extrusion over here. And then I'll come back and tell you how I did the whole. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and created this little extrusion. I've also tweaked the vertices slightly so that it maintains its nice circular shape. Now, this was extruded from 2 polygons in this original, so we've got this line running down the middle. Now I'm going to go ahead and, if I go to a top view, we're going to add in this section here, so this hole. So the first thing I'm going to do is, with the slice tool, I'm going to slice across like that, and like that. I'm then going to select all of these polygons here, and I'm going to slice down, and down again. And when you select these, it just cuts the highlighted polygons. So this means we need to go in and manually connect these up. So I'm going to do that on the top and on the bottom as well. And with that done, I'm going to select all of these middle polygons all the way around. And we're going to inset these slightly using the bevel tool. Now this adds a polyflow running all the way around this object, which will just help us with any smoothing issues. Now with that done, we want to add in a slight shelf here. We basically have a hole through the middle, but there's a point where the entirety of this object comes down to, and we're going to take that down to about there. So if that's not clear, I'll show you exactly what I mean. I'm going to delete all of those polygons, and then going to click on this top edge. And we're going to select all the way around this top section, so I'm just going to hit the up key on my keyboard to select all of those guys, and then going to extend these down. So I'm going to use the move tool, so extend and then activate to create the new edges, and then switch to the move tool to move it down into position. I'm just lining it up with these edges coming in here on the left. So when you're done there, we can weld these verts together using our new shortcut, which is getting a lot of use on this object. Now what we have is a situation where we need to join up these two guys over here. So I'm going to select the edges on both sides and click bridge. Now bearing in mind we have this edge running down the exact center, we can change the segments from 1 to 2 and things should line up pretty closely. Now we can just come in and weld that guy manually. And now what we have to do is join up this edge loop here with this bottom edge loop. And so I'm going to delete those faces there. I'm then going to double click this edge loop and double click this edge loop and try and bridge them. We want to give it a segment of 1, and if things don't look good we can try to turn off reverse orient, and that will fill in that section nicely. Now it's just a case of going in and adding in some support edges to avoid it doing this curvy thing. So I'm going to go do that now and then give you a quick look before we move on. So after adding in these edges, we end up with an object that looks a lot better. Now another thing I've done is to take this top object, and I've brought that little extrusion down throughout the entire column, and I had to add an extra edge at the top in order to do that and maintain a nice hard crease. So you can see right now that that middle section runs right into the middle of this bottom disc. So now we're going to take a look at this object, so I'm going to Shift H to hide everything else and go to a top view, and you can see that this object is the one that has this extrusion here. However, if we go to a left view, you'll see that it actually is in two parts. We have this extrusion and then a little bit below it. So what I'm going to do is grab all of these verts and then move those up into position, like so. And what we're going to do is create the extrusion first and then add in this little cylinder on the bottom afterwards. So back in the top view, I'm going to double click the entire object and I'm going to rotate it so that these polygons here face down the extrusion. So I'm going to rotate it to about there. When you're happy, you can select all of these polygons and bevel them slightly. Now we want to move these along the extrusion, so I'm going to change our action center to selection, which will allow us to move with the move tool along the direction of the selection normal, which is roughly what we want. So you can see if I scale these down on the y-axis now, we roughly match the position of the extrusion. Now I'm going to scale these in on the x as well. And with that done, we can now start adding in some extra edges. Now you can see here that things get a little bit thinner, so I'm going to add in one extra edge with the loop slice tool and scale this in slightly on the X, and this just lines us up with our background image. So back into perspective mode, we can start adding in some edges to shore up the creased corners. So I'm going to just add in some edges around the edges like this. Lots of loop slicing basically. Now another trick is to use existing edges and move them into position, and the best way to do that would be to select them, come up to the edge menu and the slide tool, and then just slide them along into the corner. Now I'm going to do this on the other side as well, so I'm going to select those edges and slide them along into the corner. And finally I'm going to grab this big polygon and this big polygon, and I'm going to bevel them both in slightly, like that. So with that done, I'm going to go to Subdivision Surface mode, and you can see we have our extrusion. Now there's perhaps one more edge we should add, and that's one just here, so that we get a nice corner where this is kind of tapering in slightly. And that looks a little bit better. So now we need to add in the bottom cylinder, so I'm going to grab this middle polygon, hold shift and click the up arrow to extend my selection by one poly loop. I'm going to go to a left view, and I'm going to bevel these down once, a little tiny bit, bevel them down again all the way to the bottom, and then I'm going to bevel them in slightly in perspective mode. Now coming out of Subdivision Surface mode, I can add in an extra support edge just at the bottom there. And then we can go in and convert these n-gons into tris by using the join average method. So I'm going to do the same thing on the top, bevel it in slightly, and join averaged. And you can see that this object is now complete. So for the winder itself, I've just created this shape with the pen tool in a new layer. Now we're going to go in and bevel that in slightly, just a little bit. We want to then go into the back here and redirect some edges. I'm going to redirect this back one across and this outer one down, and then we can delete this corner polygon, sorry, this corner edge, and do the same over here, like so, and delete that edge. And this will give us a nice hard edge here, but a curve around the rest of the model. So with that done, I'm going to tab out of subdivision mode and go to a back view. I'll select all of our polygons and extrude them down to the very bottom. Now you can see we need to move these verts to the left slightly to create that slope, so I'm going to do that. And then what I'm going to do is select all of these bottom polygons and click Shift H to hide the rest of the model. And we've done this because I want to move these into position to match the very outer edge of the winder on our reference. So I'm going to keep going. Pull these up here, and that one up as well, and this one, and we'll just keep going, pulling these up over to here. When you're happy, we want to turn our action center back to automatic from selection, go into perspective mode to check that everything's looking good, and then we can hit U to unhide, and we'll now have that slope in our model. So I'm going to add in some support edges, one at the top and one at the very bottom. And then back in a back view, you can see we have this slope here, so we need to create that guy. So I'm going to go to perspective and select this section of polygons here. Then in the back view, we're going to move these down into position, like so. Now I'm going to go to subdivision surface mode and take a look at what we've got. You can see that things are looking pretty good, but in our back view, you'll see that this area here is a lot more kind of tight than it is down here. So I'm going to select this edge and bevel with a round level of 1. That's just going to give us a nice tight edge at the top there. Now back in a top view, I'm just going to check to make sure that adding in these edges haven't ruined our polyflow. So I'm just going to tweak these slightly to try and maintain as much of a curve here as we can, like that. And with that, this object is done. Now for where it joins into this part of the model, I'm just going to grab this section, grab these 4 middle polys, I'm going to bevel them out once, bevel them again, and one more time, and then hit delete to get rid of it. And you can see now that if I select both objects at once, our entire winder is done. So I'm going to cut and paste those into the same layer and drop those into our top details. And now we can move on. We're now going to move on to this shutter lock object, which sits on the front of the main body. Now, it doesn't use any techniques that we haven't covered thus far, but I also didn't want to leave you guys to do it by yourselves because it is a little bit of a complicated object. So I'm going to tackle this a little bit differently than normal, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about this in the comments. So as you can see, I've already created the object, and in subdivision surface mode you can see that it's basically a curved plane. We have this slightly raised out section there with a hole in the middle, and this bit at the top is curved and has 2 extrusions. Now, as well as making the object, I have also, if I hit U, saved every other step along the way as well. So we're now going to go in and take a look at how I created it. Okay, so starting at this end, you can see I basically started with a plane. I beveled in these 2 bottom vertices and then made some cuts to get us this middle shape. I then pulled this out to match the side reference. With that done, I added in some support edges, which made sure that when we went to subdivision surface mode, we maintained the shape that we wanted. Now, as in this shape we only have 4 verts with which to create the hole, I decided to add in some extra edges. So I've added in 4 vertically and 3 running horizontally across the model. And with those edges, I've then rearranged them into this shape, as you can see here, and then beveled it in slightly and deleted the polygons to give us this nice round hole. Now, it does take a little bit of tweaking together. I've kind of scaled in these corner vertices, but just try and match it up with the ref as best as you can. Now, this next stage, first of all, I went in and beveled this top edge with a round level of 0 to get us a hole at the top, and I deleted those polygons. I also added in some support edges on either side to make sure that we kept a nice kind of crisp edge at the top there. Now, as that done, I also went and added in some thickness that you can see there, and I did that by double-clicking the entire loop and edge extending back, and then scaling it down on the Z-axis. And you can see I'm a little bit past it there, but about there looks pretty good. With that done, we can move on and start creating this curve. Now, what I did for this is, first of all, I moved these two verts out slightly so that they matched the extent of the curve, so the very edge of it. I then grabbed all of these edges, in fact in the top view, so you can come in. Now I don't want to move this outer one, but I want to move everything from that inner one, and the same on the other side. So I'm going to grab all of these verts. We need to go to perspective and deselect these bottom ones because we don't want these guys to move. Then in the top view, I'm going to use a cylindrical fall off. So click on fall off and click cylinder. I'm then going to click on the middle vertice and drag out to the outer one, and then pull down so we get kind of a squashed circle like that. Now with that in position, we can come down here and click Shape Preset. We want to change that to Ease In, and then if I activate the Move tool and pull back, we get a nice curved shape, and obviously this will match up nicely with your reference image. So when that's done, you want to click the Fall Off, and then we'll move on. So the next section, what I basically did was, let's see, what did I do? I've added in this extra extrusion at the back, and that's very simple. What I did was come in here and grab these edges, and then hold down the up arrow on my keyboard to select all the way around. And with that done, you can just extend back once, a little tiny bit, shift click and extend back again to the very back, and then one more time to give us that back edge. And then if I was to move this into Subdivision Surface mode, you can see we have the shape that we're after. Although at the moment, these edges are a little bit too curved. So what I did next was go in and add in a support edge running all the way around the top of this model like this. So if I was to double click this, you can see that essentially it's running around all the way around here. And I did that by, first of all, adding in a loop there, like so. I then did the same on the other side. And then I deleted these two edges. Now with them out of the picture, we can double click this and get rid of those guys as well, and add in an extra loop just there. Now it's just a case of going in and adding these up so they switch to quads. So I'm going to move that guy to there, we'll bring this guy down to here, and in fact we'll add an extra edge just running around the front there as well. And we'll join those guys up, and you can see that this side now looks perfect. So I did that, and then we went on and created this extrusion at the top of the model here. So to do that, I basically grabbed these guys. I'm just going to move that one back slightly into position. So I'm going to grab all of these polygons at the top here. I'm going to bevel it up once, twice, 3 times, come around the back and get rid of all of these guys, and hit delete. And then you see we have a nice extrusion. Now the final thing that I did was add in a little bit of depth around the back here. And again, it's just very, very simple. I came in and selected some edges, like so. Just extended them down, and then merged these end verts over there using our keyboard shortcut. And with that done, we had this nice outer edge at the back. And as you can see, that's the object we've ended up with. So that will be the shutter lock done, and I'm now going to move on to the bit that actually sits inside of it. Okay, behind the outline that we made previously, there's basically this plate that you push up to stop changing the shutter speed. So I've just basically created this plane and added in some extra edges. Then I've used the shutter lock layer to move this into position so that when in Subdivision Surface mode, we have a bit of a gap between this and the hole, as you can see there. I then just extruded it down so it's thick all the way down like that. Now for the button, what I've done is created this object. So I've created a plane, and I've added in some cuts across it to match where these objects lie, so where these cuts lie. Then what I'm going to do is basically bevel in everything to add a row of polygons running around the outside. We'll then grab the bits that we need. So I'm going to grab that row, and that row, and that row, and that row, and finally this part. I'm going to bevel all of this out once, twice, 3 times. Then I'm going to grab this back edge, just turn these off quickly, grab that back edge and extend it back once and twice. And with that done, you can go to Subdivision Surface mode and take a look at what we've got. Now if we want to kind of show up some of these edges a little bit, what we could do is come in and select these edges here and loop slice with a count of 2 and a mode of symmetry, just to kind of make those a little bit harder. And we can do the same thing here with a count of 1. Just add that extra edge in there and there. And with that done, it's just a case of going into a top view and going to Subdivision Surface mode and making it fit that mesh item. So I'm just going to move this forward a little bit, grab these middle verts and just bring them forward slightly, like that. And when you're done, you can cut that into the same layer, bring back our shutter lock and take a look at what we've got. And you might have to tweak one or two little tiny things, such as here I can see that this is perhaps a little bit wide, so I'm going to scale that in slightly. I'm going to move the whole button up just a touch, like so, and maybe just to the left just a little bit, like that. And that is our shutter lock entirely completed. Now I've just quickly added in 2 sections off camera because they are just ridiculously easy. First of all, we have this section here, which is pretty much just a squashed cylinder which I've extruded up and then given a little bit of depth, and I've just pushed it through the box there. And the other part are these 2 dials. The one is the main shutter speed, the thing you turn to change the shutter speed, and this has kind of grooves on it, as you can see from our top view. But what I do with these is either use a bump or use a displacement map. Now the second one is another dial that sits just above it. It's a little bit smaller and a little bit thinner, and I've just left a tiny bit of room so we can get some nice play on some shadows and some lighting in there. So with those done, I'm going to move now onto the flash section. Now before moving on to the flash object, I've just quickly gone in and converted the n-gons that were either side of this top body object into quads and tris. So it's nothing spectacular. I've just gone in with the edge slice tool and split those guys up. Now moving into the flash object, I'm going to go to a top view and take a look at what we've got. Now when we make this object, it's really important to keep checking your top, your left and your back views to make sure that things match up as accurately as possible. So I've gone ahead and created some objects for us. I've created this base object, which is essentially just a cube that sits on top of this section, and it's tapered at the side slightly. And then I've added in some support edges to make sure we look good in Subdivision Surface mode, and I've also inset this bottom polygon and then deleted it. On top of that we have these silver blocks. Now on this side you can see I started with a cube, I then beveled out this edge twice and then beveled out this face to create this overhang. I've also added in this front section by just beveling out this face here. Now when creating this and tweaking it, it's important to keep checking your reference images to make sure that it matches up as closely as possible. Now when you're happy with the shape, you can add in some support edges like I've done over here, so that when we go to Subdivision Surface mode, things look really pretty good. Now with that done, I've also added in a top block, which is essentially just another cube that sits between the 2 silver ones, so the top 3 levels together look like that. Now if I go to a top view, you'll see that we've got this shape here, which is this circle with an extended side to it. Now this is actually coming from this bottom block, and it's extruding up through this top one. So we're now going to go in and look at doing that. So as you can see, I've created this shape and positioned it on top of the base object. Now I created this by making a cylinder that was this size, and then I inset it once to get this loop, and then again to get this inside polygon. After doing that, I selected these edges here, and then extended them down and scaled them down to the very end of the block. Now with that done, I added in a support edge over here and redirected it slightly, giving us a row of polys that ran around the entire object. And I'll show you how I did that now. Come over here and select one of these edges. And with the loop slice tool, we're just going to add in an extra edge there. Now with the edge slice tool, I'm going to join that up and then add in an extra vertex there to make sure that we tighten up this corner. Now there are some edges that we can get rid of there. And in doing this, we've created this loop that runs all the way around the object. Now I'm going to invert our selection by clicking on the left open bracket. And with that done, we can bevel up once, twice, and I'm going to go to a left view and bring back our base object, our top object. We want to bevel it up to the top level of that, so about there. Now when you're done, you can add in an extra edge just at the end there, and also one running around the very top. And in Subdivision Surface mode, things will be looking as they need to be. So now we need to go in and attach this to the base object. So how exactly do we do that? Well, if I bring back the base object, you'll see that I've gone ahead and basically created some extra cuts in the correct positions. And the best way to see this would be probably here. So you can see that I've added in extra cuts that line up with the position of the base circle. So what I can do is go in and basically delete all of these polygons in here. With that done, we can cut the base circle into the base layer, and then it's just a case of going in and welding up all of these vertices. So as you can see, we're now completely attached, and I've also gone ahead and added in these extra edges here, which, just like before, I've redirected around the outside of the object. And with that done, we can come in and we can basically bevel this in slightly, and we're just going to create this grey disc in the middle. So I'm going to bevel that down, and again, then in, up slightly, up again, a tiny bit more, once in, and then we can join averaged. And then if you go to Subdivision Surface mode, you see that we get that nice grey circle in the middle there. And there's also some grey circles at this end, but because they're so small, I'd probably suggest doing those with a bump or displacement map. So now we need to create the hole in the top box, which will allow this circle to poke through. So as you can see, I've selected some polygons on the base object. Now I haven't selected any from the side of the base object itself or its bottom, and I haven't selected any from the very top of our extrusion, but everything else is selected. So I'm going to hit copy and paste that into a new mesh layer. I'll then hide the base, and we want to flip this entire section with the F key. And then I'm going to come in and delete these back polygons like this, and hit delete. I'll then get rid of this edge as well, so hit backspace to get rid of that guy. Now with these selected, I'm going to go to a back view, I'm going to hit Control C, Control V, and move it up slightly. And then I'm going to activate the scale tool, and over here on the left, I'm going to change the Y scale to -100, and then hit F to flip the polygons. And what we've done is basically created the two sides of this. Now all we need to do is go in and merge the two together. So as you can see, I've merged these middle vertices by selecting them all, scaling them down to nothing on the Y, and then merging in the vertex menu. I then selected all of the outer edges and bridged them using the bridge tool. Now we can go in, double click this middle edge. We don't need that anymore, so I'm going to hit backspace to get rid of it. And now we just need to scale this into position. So I'm going to bring back our top reference, go into a left view, and I'm going to pull this down and move it to there. And with that done, if I bring back everything we've got, we should, hopefully, be able to press Tab for Subdivision Surface mode, and everything will look as it should. So that is the flash object completed. Now I've hidden everything other than our middle section body. I'm going to go into a left view, and I'm basically going to make a cut along this side of the hinge. So with the slice tool and that polygon selected, I'm just going to add in a cut there. I'm then going to go to the right view. I'm going to grab this edge and slide that slightly to the left. Now I'm just going to bring up our vertices just to make this a little bit easier to see. And with that done, I'm going to grab all of the polygons that make up the back door of the camera. So all the way around here, and I'll just check that in a left view. And that looks pretty good to me, so I'm going to cut and paste those in a new layer. And with that done, I'm going to go back to a back view. I'm going to select all these top verts and move them up to the very top of this extrusion. We'll do the same thing on the bottom. We'll grab all of these verts and move them up slightly to there. And then I'm going to slice both sections. So I'm going to slice the very top of that extrusion and the very bottom of this extrusion up here as well. You can always just tweak this ever so slightly with the move tool. Now with that done, we need to look around and basically create these tabs up here. So what I'm going to do is select these polygons and slice down the middle. Then I'm going to select the row along one and slice again to create the next point on these indentations. Then we just have to cut the bottom here, but for the moment I'm going to select all the way up and then slice on that corner, select these guys and slice on that corner. Now we can just go ahead and basically select all of the edges we need. Back in the back view, move them up into position. Remember, we've got this extra vert here to tweak as well. So we'll do the same thing on the bottom. So I'm going to grab these edges here and pull those down. And then we're going to grab these verts and just move them into position. And with that done, I'm going to grab all of the surrounding faces that make up the extrusion. So we go all the way around. Now I'm going to leave this polygon here and just start again at the top. Don't want that going. Come around the top here, and I'm going to bevel these out by 1mm. So just looking over here. I'll then come along and grab these end faces, so just these three, and bevel these out an extra 0.5mm, like so. Now with that done, it's just a case of going in and adding some support edges. So as you can see, I've added in these extra edges in all of the normal places, and that gives us this object when we go to Subdivision Surface mode. Now the only place I haven't added in support edges are on these 2 points here, and the reason for that is that it's kind of on a very sensitive part of the model. We've taken time to create this curve so that it follows the reference image exactly, and adding in extra edges to this is going to slightly change that polygon flow. So what we need to do is basically the same as at the top there on the winder object. We need to add in some edges and then slightly tweak them to maintain the curve of the object. Now, as we don't want the edges going up into this top part, I'm going to delete these 4 faces. And this allows us to use the loop slice tool and only add extra edges to the bottom section of the model. So I'm going to add in one on either side of these points. And when that's done, I'm going to go to the top section, and I'm going to add in some extra edges to create some triangles. And in doing this, we can go in and delete these extra edges. And if we do this on the other point as well, so do that there, and then we can delete these edges in here. And this leaves us with this edge loop, which we can then deselect these 2 sides and click bridge to fill those polygons back in. So now we know that we've got tris and quads and everything is perfectly matching up. In Subdivision Surface mode, things are looking pretty good, but if we go to a bottom view, things are going to be slightly different than they were before, and we can prove this by bringing in the bottom section body. Now I'm going to turn the visibility on that layer and turn it into Subdivision Surface mode, and then come back to our new mesh. In a bottom view, you can see that we're slightly out of the black line that marks the outer section of the bottom section body. So what we want to do is grab these verts and just move them in and tweak them until we line up as closely as we can. So it's just a case of doing this for both this point and this other point over here. And when that's done, we can move on to shaping the front. Now just before we attack the front, there is one final thing I have to do, and I've selected all of the middle polygons of this object, and I'm just going to hit B for bevel. I'm going to inset them slightly, then activate the move tool and pull them out about 1.5 millimeter. So about over there. With that done, I'm going to add in 2 support edges, one at the bottom down here, and one at the top. And this creates this nice kind of leather extrusion that we have at the back of the camera. So with that done, now we can move on to the front. We're now going to start work on the front of the middle section. So I'm going to go to a left view, and we're first off going to make some slices to add in these cuts. I'm going to add in one there, one down here as well, and then one finally for this bottom section. I'm then going to select an edge here and loop slice to add in this vertical cut. I'll then go to a right view, and you can see that we need to add in one extra edge there, so again with a loop slice, just to move that into position. Now we also have a section on the front that we need to take a look at, and it's this bit here. And it's basically a section that's flat with the body of the camera, but has a little tiny bit that sticks out from the body up into this block here, which is the grip section. If we go to a left view, you can see that this sticks out a fair way from the camera. So we're going to create that now. I'm going to go to a front view. I'm going to add in a few more edges. So first off, I'm going to grab an edge there and loop slice to add that into position. I'm just going to move that slightly to the left. Then I'm going to loop slice again to create the very top of this shape. And one more time to create the bottom. Now with those parts in place, we need to move this edge just slightly to the right so it sits on this corner here. I'm then going to delete this polygon and we can start creating this shape. Now I'm going to grab this edge, and I'm going to go to perspective mode and extend it out along the z-axis away from the body of the camera. Now in the left view, you can see that I'm going to go about halfway along the kind of extrusion depth of this block, so about there looks pretty good to me. Then back in the front view, we're going to move this into position and scale it down on the Y to match our reference images. We're then going to extend again to the left to match this edge here. So just get that in position. With that in place, I can select these two edges, and these two edges, and bridge them together. With that done, I'm going to select these three polygons at the front, and I'm going to bevel these in to create the frame that runs around this entire object. And when we've done this, you'll notice that these edges are slightly sticking out, so I need to basically move these back to the left into position. You might notice that they're also slightly sticking into the camera as well, so I'm going to move them out on the Z-axis to flatten up those edges. Now with that done, I'm going to select this entire outer loop, and I'm going to bevel it out ever so slightly, like so. And then that's it done, basically. If we go to Subdivision Surface mode, however, of course everything's going to look terrible. So we need to go in and use the Loop Slice tool to add on some extra edges. We'll then come back and add in the extrusions at the top and the bottom of this section. So as you can see, after adding in some loop slices in all the normal places, you end up with an object that looks like this, so it looks a lot better. Though I might just add in one extra edge, just running down there. This kind of just tightens up this side here. So with this all done, we need to go in and create the top and bottom extrusions. So I'm going to go to a left view and select these polys, and then these polys as well. We're just going to continue this selection all the way around, making sure we get all of these little ones in here. So same at top. So all the way around, grab here, up the other side, and then along the top. And then we're not going to extrude these out as much as the back, but I'm going to bevel and just pull this out about 0.5 millimeter. And with that done, we need to go and add in, of course, yet more edges to shore these up in Subdivision Surface mode. Now with the cuts made, you can see that things are really starting to take shape. However, we do have a little bit of a problem, and that's this gap in between this bottom section and this middle part, and it's the same at the top. We just don't have these sections lining up. So we need to go in and fix that now. I'm going to start off by selecting the bottom section body and taking it out of Subdivision Surface mode. Then I'll add in an edge just here, just in line with the front section. I'll then go to the other side and do the same thing. So we're going to add in an edge just there like that. And then we can grab these top edges all the way around. So select a few and hold down the up arrow, and then just tap the last few. Then I'm going to go to a left view, and we're just going to extend this up into position. We'll obviously have to add in some support edges to this, however you should be pretty proficient at that now. So I'm going to take a look at this flap. Now just like before, we're going to add in extra edges on the corners here to line up, so I'm just going to move that to that corner. Do the same thing here. Now on the other side, we're going to have the same problem we have with the middle section itself, in that adding edges to this will slightly alter the curve's shape. So we're going to tweak this into position, and then we'll have to go in and move around a couple of vertices in order to match the shape correctly. So with this done, I'm going to grab these inner top polygons and move those down into position. And then going to grab this edge and move that down. Do the same thing over here as well. And then I'm going to go in and add some support edges so that we maintain this shape in Subdivision Surface mode. Now as you can see, I've gone ahead and added in those extra edges on this side of the indent, but on the other side I've used a little bit of a different technique. And what I've done is just drawn these edges down here and then move them into here and then back up the other side. And this means we don't have to move these verts, and this curve remains exactly as we want it. So just to recover that, I'm going to basically draw down one side, then come into the middle, and then go straight back up the other side. This maintains tris and quads, shores up this corner, but doesn't affect the overall curve. At this end, I've also added in some extra support edges on either side of these two corners, which makes this a nice shape in there. But you can see that this edge I've slightly lowered down as it was affecting the smoothing of this section, so I've just grabbed a couple of these edges and just pulled them down a little bit. So what we're going to do is basically go ahead and do exactly the same thing on the top section. However, in order to add edges in a kind of an easy to control way, I've basically gone in and deleted the extra edges I created on this end at the top. And this means I can come in and just add this edge with the loop slice, and it's not going to add in loops all over the place basically. So I've also done this on the other side as well. So I'm going to select this edge here and add in an extra loop, and you can see it just stops at the top here, which is what we want. So we can go ahead and basically delete all of these polygons that we don't want. So all of these guys. And then we just need to move these verts up into position. With that done, we can add in some extra edges, exactly like on this bottom section, and this top part will be completely reshaped. And with that done, you should end up with something like this. So this just matches that back door section pretty much perfectly.